I was thinking that it might be fun to read a fairy tale. So I went to Project Gutenberg, and Project Gutenberg is this really great resource where they've archived, it's basically a library, they've archived a bunch of stuff that's older, and I've read some really neat, obscure things that I would never have thought to look for before there, but this time I'm going to go with a book by Andrew Lang, and Andrew Lang, kind of like you might think of like Grimm's fairy tales or Andersen's fairy tales. Andrew Lang's also somebody who collected European fairy tales and put them into books that they titled by color. So I'm going to look at the red fairy tale book, the red fairy book, and you can see the table of contents here. There's all sorts of things. I don't know which one to do. I think I want to avoid the ones that I already kind of know. So the 12 Dancing Princesses, I kind of know. And I think I kind of know Rapunzel. And definitely know Jack and the Beanstalk. That's really popular. Does anyone have any requests from what we can see right now? There's some that are really enigmatic, like Dapplegrim. What is that? I have no idea. And then there are ones that are a little bit more, you might know what's going on, like the Little Good Mouse. Now, it really bothers me that it's not the Good Little Mouse. In English, without us knowing it, there's an order that we put verbs in. And I'd have to look up the order to tell you. But usually it would be good and then little. So that implies that little is an adjective and good mouse is a property. So it implies that the character of the mouse is that they're good and the property of the mouse is that they're little. So it's a type of good mouse. So I've talked about that enough that it might be really interesting.
It might also be like...
Yeah, let's start there. I'm curious. What in the world is... Where'd it go? The Little Good Mouse. Here we go. All right. I've never read this before. I'm going to be talking at reading speed. Wish me luck. The Little Good Mouse. Once upon a time, there lived a king and a queen who loved each other so much that they were never happy unless they were together. Day after day, they went out hunting or fishing. Night after night, they went to balls or to the opera. They sang, they danced, and ate sugar plums, and were the gayest of the gay, and all their subjects followed their example, so that the kingdom was called the Joyous Land. Now in the next kingdom, everything was as different as it could possibly be. The king was sulky and savage, and never enjoyed himself at all. He looked so ugly and cross that all his subjects feared him, and he hated the very sight of a cheerful face. So if he ever caught anyone smiling, he had his head cut off that very minute. Now this kingdom was very appropriately called the Land of Tears. Now when this wicked king heard of the happiness of the jolly king, he was so jealous that he collected a great army and set off to fight him. And the news of his approach was soon brought to the king and queen. The queen, when she heard of it, was frightened out of her wits and began to cry bitterly. "Sire," she said, "let us collect all our riches and run away as far as we ever can to the other side of the world." But the king answered, "Fie, madam, I'm far too brave for that. It is better to die than to be a coward. Then he assembled all his armed men, and after bidding the queen a tender farewell, he mounted his splendid horse and rode away. When he was lost to sight, the queen could do nothing but weep and wring her hands and cry. Alas, if the king is killed, what will become of me and of my little daughter? And she was so sorrowful that she could neither eat nor sleep. The king sent her a letter every day, but at last, one morning, as she looked out of the palace window, she saw a messenger approaching in hot haste. "What news, courier? What news?" cried the queen, and he answered, "The battle is lost, and the king is dead, and in another moment the enemy will be here." The poor queen fell back insensible, and all her ladies carried her to bed, and stood around her weeping and wailing. Then began a tremendous noise and confusion, and they knew that the enemy had arrived, and very soon they heard the king himself stamping about the palace seeking the queen. Then her ladies put the little princess into her arms and covered her up, head and all, in the bedclothes, and ran for their lives. And the poor queen lay there shaking, hoping she would not be found. But very soon the wicked king clattered into the room, and in a fury because the queen would not answer when he called her, he tore back all her silken coverings and tweaked off her lace cap. And when her lovely hair came tumbling down over her shoulders, he wound it 3 times around his hand and threw her over his shoulder, where he carried her like a sack of flour. The poor queen held her little daughter safe in her arms and shrieked for mercy. But the wicked king only mocked her and begged her to keep on shrieking, as it amused him, and so mounted his great black horse and rode back to his own country. When he got there, he declared he would have the queen and the little princess hanged on the nearest tree. But his courtiers said that it seemed a pity, for when the baby grew up, she would be a very nice wife for the king's only son. The king was rather pleased with this idea, and shut the queen up in the highest room of a tall tower, which was very tiny and miserably furnished, with a table and a very hard bed on the floor. He then sent for a fairy who lived near his kingdom, and after receiving her with more politeness than he generally showed, and after entertaining her at a sumptuous feast, he took her to see the queen. The fairy was so touched by the sight of the queen's misery that she kissed her hand and whispered, "Courage, madam, I see a way to help you." The queen, a little comforted by these words, received her graciously and begged her to take pity upon the poor little princess who had met with such a sudden reversal of fortune. But the king got very cross when he saw them whispering together and cried harshly, "Make an end of these fine greetings, madam. I brought you here to tell me if the child will grow up pretty and fortunate." Then the fairy answered that the princess would be as pretty and clever and as well brought up as it was possible to be. And the old king growled to the queen that it was lucky for her that it was so, as they would certainly have been hanged if it was otherwise. Then he stomped off, taking the fairy with him and leaving the poor queen to tears. "How can I wish my little daughter to grow up pretty if she's to be married to that horrid little dwarf, the king's son?" she said to herself. "And yet, if she were ugly, we shall both be killed. If only I could hide her away somewhere, so the cruel king could never find her." As the days went on, the queen and the little princess grew thinner and thinner, for their hard-hearted jailer gave them every day only 3 boiled peas and a tiny morsel of black bread, so they were always terribly hungry. At last, one evening, as the queen sat at her spinning wheel, for the king was so avaricious that she was made to work day and night, she saw a tiny, pretty little mouse creep out of a hole and said to it, "Alas, poor creature, what are you coming to look for here? I have only 3 piece more days' provisions, so unless you wish to fast, you must go elsewhere." But the mouse ran hither and thither, and danced and capered so prettily, that at last the queen gave it her last pea, which she was keeping for her supper, saying, "Here, little one, eat it up. I have nothing better to offer you, but I give this willingly in return for the amusement I have had from you." She had hardly spoken when she saw upon the table a delicious little roast partridge, and 2 dishes of preserved fruit. "Truly," said she, "a kind action never goes unrewarded." And she and the little princess ate their supper with great satisfaction, and then the king gave whatever was left over to the little mouse, who danced better than ever afterwards. The next morning came the jailer, and with the queen's allowance of 3 peas, which he brought in on a large dish to make them look smaller. And as soon as he set it down, the little mouse came and ate up all 3, so that when the queen wanted dinner, there was nothing left for her. Then she was quite provoked and said, "What a bad little beast that mouse must be! If it goes on like this, I shall be starved." But when she glanced at the dish again, it was all covered with all sorts of nice things to eat, and the queen made a very good dinner, and was gayer than usual over it. But afterwards, as she sat at her spinning wheel, she began to consider what would happen if the little princess did grow up pretty enough to please the king, and she said to herself, "If I could only think of some way to escape." As she spoke, she saw the little mouse playing in a corner with some long straws. The queen took them and began to plait them, saying, "If only I had enough straws, I would make a basket with them, and let my baby down in it from the window to any kind passer-by who would take care of her." By the time the straws were all plaited, the little mouse had dragged in more and more, until the queen had plenty to make her basket, and she worked at it day and night, while the little mouse danced for her amusement. And at dinner and supper time, the queen gave it 3 peas and a little bit of black bread, and always found something good in the dish in their place. She could really not imagine where all the nice things came from. At last, one night when the basket was finished, the queen was looking out the window to see how long a cord she must make to lower it to the bottom of the tower, when she noticed a little old woman who was leaning on her stick and looking up at her. Presently she said, "I know your trouble, madam. If you like, I will help you." "Oh, my dear friend," said the queen, "if you really wish to be of use to me, you will come at the time that I will appoint, and I'll let down my poor little baby in a basket. If you will take her and bring her up for me, when I am rich I will reward you splendidly." "I don't care about the reward," said the old woman, "but there's one thing I would like. You must know that I'm very particular about what I eat. And if there's one thing that I fancy above all others, it is plump, tender little mouse. If there is such a thing in your garret, just throw it down to me, and in return I'll promise that your little daughter shall be well taken care of." When the queen heard this, she began to cry, and made no answer, and the old woman, after waiting a few minutes, asked what was the matter. "Why, said the queen, "there's only one mouse in this garret, and it is such a dear, pretty little thing that I cannot bear to think of its being killed." "What?" cried the woman in a rage. "Do you care more for a miserable mouse than your own baby? Goodbye, madam. I leave you to enjoy its company, and for my own part I thank my stars that I can get plenty of mice without troubling you to give them to me." And she hobbled off, grumbling and growling. As to the queen, she was so disappointed that, in spite of finding a better dinner than usual, and seeing the little mouse dancing in a spurious mood, she could do nothing but cry. That night, when her baby was fast asleep, She packed it into the basket and wrote on a slip of paper, "This unhappy little girl is called Delicia." Then she pinned it to its robe, and very sadly she was shutting the basket when in sprang the little mouse and sat on the baby's pillow. "Ah, little one," said the queen, "it cost me dear to save your life. How shall I know now where my Delicia is being taken care of or no? Anyone else would have let the greedy old woman have you and eat you up, but I could not bear to do it." Whereupon the mouse answered, "Believe me, madam, you will never repent of your kindness." The queen was immensely astonished when the mouse began to speak, and still more when she saw its sharp little nose turn to a beautiful face, and its paws to hands and feet, and it suddenly grew tall, and the queen recognized the fairy who had come with the wicked king to visit her. The fairy smiled at her astonished look and said, "I wanted to see if you were faithful and capable of feeling a real friendship for me. For you see, we fairies are rich in everything but friends, and those are hard to find." "It's not possible that you should want for friends, you charming creature," said the queen, kissing her. "Indeed it is so," said the fairy. The fairy said, "For those who are only friendly with me for their own advantage, I do not count at all. But when you cared for the poor little mouse, you would not have known there was anything to be gained by it. And to try you further, I took the form of the old woman whom you talked to from the window. And then I was convinced that you really loved me." Then turning to the little princess, she kissed her rosy lips 3 times, saying, "Dear little one, I promise you shall be richer than your father, and live 100 years, always pretty and happy, without fear of old age and wrinkles." The queen, quite delighted, thanked the fairy gratefully and begged her to take charge of little Delicia and bring her up as her own daughter. This she agreed to do, and then they shut the basket and lowered it carefully, baby and all, to the ground at the foot of the tower. The fairy then changed herself back into the form of mouse. This delayed her only a few seconds, after which she ran nimbly down the straw rope, only to find when she got to the bottom that the baby had disappeared. In great terror, she ran up again to the queen, saying, "All is lost. My enemy, Cancaline, has stolen the princess away. You must know that she's a cruel fairy who hates me, and as she's older than I am and has more power, I can do nothing against her. I know no way of rescuing Alicia from her clutches." Oh no, fairy drama. When the queen heard this terrible news, she was heartbroken and begged the fairy to do all she could to get the poor little princess back again. In this moment, in came the jailer, and when he missed the little princess, he at once told the king, who came in a great fury, asking what the queen had done with her. She answered that a fairy, whose name she did not know, had come and carried her off by force. Upon this, the king stamped on the ground and cried in a terrible voice. I'm not going to try to do a terrible voice. "You shall be hung! I always told you you should." And without another word, he dragged the unlucky queen out into the nearest wood, climbed up into a tree to look for a branch to which he could hang her. But when he was quite high up, the fairy, who had made herself invisible and followed them, gave him a sudden push, which made him lose his footing and fall to the ground with a crash and break 4 of his teeth. While he was trying to mend them, the fairy carried the queen off on her flying chariot. She had a flying chariot this whole time? To a beautiful castle, where she was so kind to her that but for the loss of Delicia, the queen would have been perfectly happy. She had a flying chariot this whole time. It's giving Red Shoes. But though the good little mouse did her very utmost, she did her best, they could not find out where Cancaline had hidden the little princess. Thus 15 years went by, and the queen had somewhat recovered from her grief, when the news reached her that the son of the wicked king wished to marry the little maiden who kept the turkeys, and that she had refused him. The wedding dresses had been made, nevertheless, and the festivals were so splendid that all the people for leagues round were flocking in to be present at them. The queen felt quite curious about the little turkey maiden, who did not wish to be a queen, so the little mouse conveyed them to the poultry yard to find out what she was like. She found the turkey maiden sitting on a big stone, barefoot and miserably dressed, in an old coarse linen gown and cap. The ground at her feet was strewn with robes of gold and silver, ribbons and lace, diamonds and pearls, over which the turkeys were stalking to and fro, while the king's ugly, disagreeable son stood opposite her, declaring angrily that if she would not marry him, she would be killed. The turkey maiden proudly answered, "I will never marry you. You are too ugly and too much like your cruel father. Leave me in peace with my turkeys, which I like far better than all your fine gifts." The little mouse watched this with great admiration, for she was as beautiful as the spring, and as soon as the wicked prince was gone, she took the form of an old peasant woman and said to her, "Good day, my pretty one. You have a fine flock of turkeys here." The young turkey maiden turned her gentle eyes on the old woman and answered, "Yet they wish me to leave them to become a miserable queen. What's your advice on the matter?" "My child," said the fairy, "a crown is a very pretty thing, but you know neither the prince nor the weight of it." "I know so well that I have refused to wear one," said the little maiden, "though I don't know who was my father or who was my mother, and I've not a friend in the world." "You have goodness and beauty, which are of more value than 10 kingdoms," said the wise fairy. "But tell me, child, how came you here? And how is it you have neither father, nor mother, nor friend?" "A fairy called Cancaline is the cause of my being here," answered she. "For while I lived with her I got nothing but blows and harsh words, until at last I could bear it no longer and ran away from her without knowing where I was going. And as I came through a wood, the wicked prince met me and offered to give me charge of the poultry yard. I accepted gladly, not knowing that I should have to see him day by day. And now he wants to marry me, but that I will never consent to." Upon hearing this, the fairy became convinced that the little turkey maiden was none other than Princess Delicia. "What is your name, my little one?" she said. "I am called Delicia, if it please you," she answered. Then the fairy threw her arms around the princess's neck and nearly smothered her with kisses. "Oh, Delicia, I'm a very old friend of yours, and I'm truly glad to find you at last. But you might look nicer than you do in that old gown, which is fit only for a kitchen maiden. Take this pretty dress and let us see the difference it will make." Wow, stranger danger is not a thing in fairy tales. So Delicia took off the ugly cap and shook out her fair, shining hair, and bathed her hands and face in clear water from the nearest spring until her cheeks were like roses. And when she was adorned with the diamonds and splendid robe the fairy had given her, she looked the most beautiful princess in the world. And the fairy with great delight cried, "Now you look as you ought, Delicia. What do you think about yourself?" And Delicia answers, "I feel as if I were the daughter of some great king." "And would you be glad if you were?" said the fairy. "And did I should," answered she. "Ah, well," said the fairy, "tomorrow I may have some pleasant news for you." So she hurried back to the castle where the queen sat busy with her embroidery and cried, "Okay, so she just left her there again. Shenanigans are going to happen. Okay. Madam, you will wager your thimble and your golden needle that I am bringing you the best news you could possibly hear. Alas, sighed the queen, since the death of the jolly king and the loss of my Delicia, all the news in the world is not worth a pin to me. There, don't be melancholy, said the fairy. I assure you the princess is quite well, and I have never seen her equal for beauty. She will be a queen tomorrow if she choose. And then she told all that had happened, and the queen first rejoiced over the thought of Delicia's beauty, but then wept at the idea of her being a turkey maiden. Okay, dude. This fairy has a chariot and could have just grabbed Delicia and brought her to her mom, but no. And it's not even like the girl is in her enemy fairy's territory. She's ran away to, she's being, I'm so, flames at the side of my face. Back to the queen. I will not hear of her being made to marry the wicked king's son, she said. Let us go at once and bring her here. Okay, smart mom. Okay. In the meantime, told you the wicked prince, who was very angry with Delicia, had sat himself down under a tree and cried and howled with rage and spite until the king heard him and cried out from the window, "What's the matter with you, that you're making all this disturbance?" The prince replied, "It's all because our turkey maiden will not love me." "Won't love you, eh?" said the king. "We'll very soon see about that." So he called his guards and told them to go and fetch Delicia. "See if I don't make her change her mind pretty soon," said the wicked king with a chuckle. Then the guards began to search the poultry yard and could find nobody there named Delicia, who, with her splendid dress and her crown of diamonds, looked such a lovely princess that they hardly dared speak to her. But she said to them very politely, "Pray tell me, what are you looking for?" "Madam," they said, "we are sent for an insignificant little person called Delicia." "Alas," said she, "that is fools. Alas," said she, "that is my name. What can you want with me?" Okay. So the guides tied her hand and feet with thick ropes for fear she might run away, and brought her to the king, who was waiting with his son. You know, if people had sense, fairy tales would be much shorter. I guess this is all so we can feel very, very smart. And brought her to the king, who was waiting with his son. When he saw her, he was much astonished at her beauty, which would have made anyone less hard-hearted sorry for her. But the wicked king only laughed and mocked her and cried, "Well, little toad, why don't you love my son, who is far too handsome and too good for you? Make haste and begin to love him this instant, or you shall be tarred and feathered." Then the poor little princess, shaking with terror, went down on her knees and cried, "Oh, don't tar and feather me, please. It would be so uncomfortable. Let me have 2 or 3 days to make my mind, and you shall do as you like with me." The wicked prince would have liked very much to see her tarred and feathered, but the king ordered that she should be shut up in a dark dungeon. Ooh, alliteration. Oh, Rama. It was just at this moment that the queen and the fairy arrived in the flying chariot. Is there a delay in getting the flying chariot? Could she not instantly have a flying chariot? Does she have to get the flying chariot out of flying chariot storage? I'm so over this flying chariot. And the queen was dreadfully distressed at the turn affairs had taken, and said miserably that she was destined to be unfortunate all her days. But the fairy bade her take courage. I'll pay them out yet, she said, nodding her head with an air of great determination. That very same night, as soon as the wicked king had gone to bed, the fairy changed herself into the little mouse, and creeping up on his pillow, nibbled his ear, so that he squealed out quite loudly, and turned over on his other side. But that was no good, for the little mouse only set to work and gnawed away the second ear until it hurt more than first. She's perfectly willing to cause massive damage and disfigurement and torture, and yet I really want to know what fairy bargains are limiting her ability to act, because there's so many other choices she could make. Then the king cried out, "Murder! Thieves!" And all his guards ran in to see what the matter, but they could find nothing and nobody, for the little mouse had run off to the prince's room and was serving him in the exact same way. Anyhow, all night long she ran from one to the other until at last, driven quite frantic by terror and want of sleep, the king rushed out of the palace crying, "Help! Help! I'm pursued by rats!" Evidently, this entire kingdom has no small dogs to use for ratting. They really haven't mentioned any pets. The prince, when he heard this, got up also and ran after the king, and they had not gone far when they both fell into a little river and were never heard of him again. I was not expecting that. Just like that, they had him up on a tree and threw him over Disney style. I mean, there was no fire for him to fall into. And he only broke 4 teeth, which evidently can be now mended. But they just ran. I have questions. I have so many questions. Then the good fairy ran to tell the queen, and they went together to the black dungeons where Delicia was imprisoned. The fairy touched each door with her wand, and it sprang open instantly, and they had to go through 40 before they came to the princess. They didn't try calling out her name. They didn't try getting her to say where she... Convinced more and more that fairy tales are to make you feel smart. Who was sitting on the floor looking very dejected. But when the queen rushed in and kissed her 20 times in a minute, whatever, and laughed and cried and told Alicia all her history, the princess was wild with the delight. Then the fairy showed her all the wonderful dresses and jewels she had brought for her and said, "Don't let us waste time. We must go and harangue the people." By what authority are these people who haven't been seen in 16 years, are they going to harangue another kingdom's people? I mean, I guess dress for the job you want is going to work. This is back when the cloth was more expensive than the gold on it. Also, if you've got people, why don't you talk to them instead of harangue them? I think whoever wrote this just really wanted to use the fun word harangue. Okay. So she walked first, looking very serious and dignified, and wearing a dress, the train of which was at least 10 ells long. Behind her came the queen, wearing a blue velvet robe. Embroidered with gold, and a diamond crown that was brighter than the sun itself. Exactly right, Virgin. There's just so many what? You're right. She had a magic wand that could open anything, and she didn't let people out of the tower 15 years ago? Don't you feel smart? I feel smart. Last of all walked Delicia, who was so beautiful that it was nothing short of marvelous. I'm really worried for this kingdom that they're going to have such foolish rulers that are so into appearances. Are any of these people educated at all? When the audience hall was quite full, how did people know to come to the audience hall? I have too much project management experience. Anyhow, she's educated in turkeys. And escaping from mean people. I mean, I don't know. Turkeys are known to be a little bit challenged in a Darwinian sense. So at least she's good at wrangling people who don't make good choices. Yeah, turkeys are dumb. Oh, I skipped a paragraph. This is how people knew. So they had just talked about how splendid they looked with a long train and blue velvet and crowns and gorgeousness. And let's see. And they proceeded through the streets, returning the salutations of all they met, great or small, and all the people turned and followed them, wondering who these noble ladies could be. When the audience hall was quite full, the fairy said to the subject of the wicked king that if they would accept Alicia, who was the daughter of the Jolly King. What happened to the Jolly King's kingdom these last 15 years? Continuity, your name is not fairy tales. As their queen, she would undertake a suitable husband for her. Because heaven forbid somebody rule without being married or having a, I need to go see like the second Princess Diaries movie again. That'll be that's the one with the, the queen is coming, right? Okay. And would promise that during their reign there should be nothing but rejoicing and merrymaking, and all dismal things shall be entirely banished. That's really sad for people who like emo things. I mean, what about people who rejoice in darkness? Man, black and white thinking. And all dismal things should be entirely banished. Upon this, the people cried with one accord, because that absolutely happens in real life. We will! We will! And we've been gloomy and miserable too long already. And they all took hands and danced around the queen and Alicia and the good fairy singing, yes, yes, we will, we will. Then there were feasts and fireworks. Where did all this come from? Does the fairy have a feast and fireworks warehouse? That's what I'm guessing. I mean, after all, she did bring food up to the tower that she could have left at any time with her magic wand. Almost done. This is the last paragraph. Then there were feasts and fireworks in every street in town. And early the next morning, the fairy, who had been all over the world in a night, it was delayed because it was run by the same people who run the flying carriage storage. You're right. That's absolutely true. I believe it. Which is evidently farther away than all over the world because the fairy is able to fly all over the world in the night. Brought back with her in her flying chariot, I guess I never put it back in storage, the most handsome and good-tempered prince she could find anywhere. That's objectification. Does he even get a name? He was so charming that Delicia loved him from the moment their eyes met, because that's healthy. And as for him, of course, he could not help thinking himself the luckiest prince in the world who had been abducted from his home. The queen felt that she had really come to the end of her misfortunes at last. And they lived happily ever after. Well, that was certainly a thing. I think in the future when I read fairy tales, I'm going to start kvetching and commenting much sooner because that was nonsense. Okay. All right. Thank you for coming with me on this journey where we read The Good Little Mouse from the Red Fairy book by Andrew Lang as it is archived in Project Gutenberg. I've tried to record this, so it might show up on either the Patreon or on YouTube, more likely YouTube, but I have experiments to do to figure out how to post to YouTube. I will probably start with some of my fidget toys and just make videos of glitter going down. So it will probably be a couple weeks before this goes up, if I'm able to make it go up. Anyhow. Good to talk with you all. I will catch up with you later. I will probably not be reading the next time. I'll probably do something a little bit more active, such as trying to talk my partner into playing a card game with me offline, where they're off screen and I can show you my cards. Or I might go into YouTube and they have games there. Or I might go into Blue Sky and try to find amazing pieces of creation and play to comment about as soon as I can figure out how to get my Blue Sky to be a little bit more PG. I'm still saying block to everyone who's like, Happy New Year, have some cleavage. Anyhow, talk with you later. Bye.